as many of the viewers already know, China is conducting an active genocide with glorifying its modern-day slavery. Millions of Uyghurs have been put in the concentration camps in China, and millions more are in forced labor facilities, while their ethnicity, their race, and their religion are being targeted. Basically, the Chinese Communist Party is criminalizing the religion, Islam, and outlining any kind of normal Islamic practices like fasting during Ramadan, or praying, or just having Islamic names, as well as just saying Salam Alaikum. Even that very peaceful greeting itself became outlawed. And anybody who's practicing the normal Islamic practices are being called radicalized Muslims or Islamic extremists. So in the camps, on those concentration camps, the Uyghurs are facing mental, physical, and the sexual torture. And many are dying over there. And women are being forcibly sterilized, and they are forced into, they are facing forcibly sterilized and also forced abortions, and they forced into marriages with Han Chinese men. If they say no for such a forced marriage, they're being labeled as Islamic extremists because she refused to marry non-Muslim Han Chinese. So those are all actually genocidal policies, and including the Uyghur children being taken away from their parents and moved to Chinese state-run orphanages, and they are being raised with communist Chinese ideologies, forfeiting their religion and ethnic identity. So all this because the Uyghurs, with their distinct culture and their religious identity, are considered as a threat to the Chinese communist regime, and that the demands they conform to atheist ideology and requires loyalty to Xi Jinping and the communist China. Basically, China is waging a war against Islam, against religion, and against free thought. Not only the Chinese regime is getting away with this genocide by promoting its false narratives and the disinformation and the false propaganda, and Beijing is actually being rewarded by hosting the 2022 Winter Olympics. Beijing has been awarded the right to host these games. Ever since Beijing hosted the 2008 Olympic Games, it made a sharp U-turn on the human rights with their Urumqi massacre in 2009, and crushing the Tibetan protests and the other attacks on the marginalized communities in China. When the 2008 Olympics were awarded to Beijing, things were already bad, but today the Chinese regime is carrying out an active genocide of the Uyghurs. So we also examined the crackdown on the Hong Kong and the ongoing repression in Tibet and Southern Mongolia, and the other horrific treatment of the just the regular Chinese people, and know that it's absolutely unimaginable that the International Olympic Committee has decided to ignore the values of humanity, no respect for the human dignity, in favor of the Chinese blood money. It's even more despicable that many Western companies, international companies, are also selling out their dignity to sponsor these genocidal games. Yeah, we have lessons learned from the 1936 Berlin Olympics, so we should not allow the International Olympics Committee to continue with the awarding this genocidal regime while conducting the active genocide. So we need to let the International Olympic Committee and the athletes, and the most importantly, the corporate sponsors, hear from us loud and clear that this is unacceptable. We also need to clear commitments from our leaders, our politicians, that they are not going to this genocidal game. We need to ask our politicians and leaders to diplomatically boycott the games. And we need to make it clear on all levels that the Olympics must not be used to legitimize a genocidal regime. As I mentioned earlier, we are repeating the worst mistakes of the history. Just as the games were a PR dream for Hitler in legitimizing his regime, the same is very true on an event, with the Beijing Olympics, even larger scale for China. The Holocaust had not yet fully begun in 1936. Also, concentration camps were built, and in many countries and leaders and the individuals claimed an ignorance. They said they didn't know it when they supported 1936 Berlin Olympics. Also, they knew back then. But today, this is information era. Everybody know what's happening, and nobody can claim on the ignorance anymore. Are still choosing to turn a blind eye for profit. That's unacceptable. So we must do everything in our power to stop this. For example, there is a discussion that boycotting the games will hurt the athletes, and they may not even affect China's plans of holding the games in Beijing. Is it horrible that the International Olympic Committee has put all the athletes in this situation? But this is the reality. It's the International Olympic Committee's responsibility to postpone or to move the games so athletes will not have to face this. While we are discussing the athlete careers and their missing opportunities, Uyghurs are losing everything. Their very lives, and their families, their kids. It is an active genocide. And China already used one of its henchmen, Hu Xijin, to threaten those that would diplomatically boycott, which means they are nervous, and they are trying to use the threats again to get away with this. Losing face is an enormous problem for the Chinese regime. So not only for what it represents in the eyes of the world, but because of the potential to alert the Chinese people to what's happening, they are scared. So we need to do everything we can to either postpone the games or move the games. If all that doesn't happen, then we need to boycott the games.
That's a valid point. I think one of the also factors is if we want to help initiate a full boycott, one of the factors also to call to the athletes as well. So directly call on them to help us with this boycott, because you are part of the equation. You are essentially, would you be willing to go and compete in an Olympics that is taking place mere miles away from such a disastrous occurring? And so it's very important that.
Well, please share everything you see on social media about this, and commit to boycotting the brands that are sponsoring the Olympics. If you follow us on social media, we are very vocal. So you can share the information, educate your peers, educate others. So we can let the the brands that's sponsoring the Olympic Games, let them know why, and call them out for not to sponsor these genocidal games, and write to your elected officials and sign the petition on the websites to join the growing chorus of voices denouncing those genocidal games. And also, please donate to the Uyghur organizations so we can continue to maintain our advocacy work. It is an enormous struggle to be taking on the Chinese Communist Party with very limited resources, and such contributions help us to continue to work with the Uyghur youth or grassroots organizations in diaspora, and then we can empower their voices and advocate for their rights and the families. So we desperately need any kind of support from especially from our Ummah Muslim brothers and sisters. We also welcome you to join the Berlin Beijing coalition, to join up and follow the social media, share, as I mentioned, and also send the email calling on the world leaders to do the right thing and stop this atrocity from playing out with approval from the world community. You can also go to our website, campaignforuyghurs.org, sign up for our mailing list there, and so you can keep update, like you receive updated information from us and educate yourself and educate the others.
That's right. I do know that the Berlin Beijing Olympics do have a template that everyone can use to email their representatives as well. So make sure you guys act on that as well. That is one. Someone was actually mentioning sources that people can go to, and one of them was Campaign for Uyghurs, and the other is also Berlin Beijing Olympics. So make sure you guys check that out.
It's very frustrating, actually. They have been downright belligerent, and they kept saying that they cannot get political. This is genocide. What part of genocide is political? While they initially took a few meetings, they were used to brush off concerns and defend the indefensible, basically, to provide a timeline again of engagements with the OIC. They have known, long before 2008 of the human rights issues in China, and that they have delayed releasing human rights due diligence plans, and now state that these will be released after Beijing 2022. How convenient, And initially, we were advocating for them to move the Olympics, and we will keep asking for that. But as they have refused to budge, we must pursue the boycotts, at least the diplomatic boycott, as a bare minimum for the government actors, and also emphasize that it's improper for athletes to attend the genocidal games. We must call on the world to be, better. The OIC hides behind the line that they cannot be political, but giving China the games is nothing but political, and they will be used by Beijing to create political legitimacy. So again, let me ask this question: is genocide a political matter, or does it concern the hearts and souls of all humanity? It's the conscience of the world, conscience of the humanity is at test, and the International Olympic Committee is failing it. Well, it's the Uyghurs are being used as slaves. When you look at the slave labor, and the when the Chinese regime is basically claiming that with those camps they are alleviating poverty alleviation for the Uyghurs. Most of the Uyghur leaders and the elites, thought leaders and elites, like famous writers, professors, doctors, and also successful business people, they're all being targeted. So everything the Chinese regime is saying there is a lie. In addition to carrying out active genocide as the Nazis did, China is profiting off of modern day slavery, using the Uyghurs as slaves, and taking the Uyghurs' sweat, blood and the tears. Basically, the Uyghur youth are placed in forced labor facilities to produce goods for many of the brands that we consume widely in our society, such as the Nike, Zara, etc. And it is very important that the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act to be passed in Congress here in the United States to begin to address our own complicity in those genocide, crimes, and also to use the only thing that CCP cares about to force a change, which is money, the economy and the money. And once again, legitimizing this regime is not only appalling because of rewarding genocide, it's also normalizing behaviors like enslavement of an ethnic group and allowing corporations to parade as sponsors while profiting off of this. I just want to mention here the recent, a couple of weeks ago, the Congressional Executive Committee on China hearing with some of the Olympic sponsors. It's despicable to sit and listen to those representatives of those companies, in which companies like Coca-Cola, which has already been tied to Uyghur slave labor in its factories in Uyghur homeland, and also shamelessly defended sponsorship of the genocidal games, and companies including the Airbnb, Visa, and the others, they are speechless because of the fear they have of the CCP's power to affect their profits. Knows, so much so that they do not even dare to say one word on Beijing's human rights abuses, let alone mentioning genocide of the Uyghurs. This form of companies in the democratic free world, those are the companies from the free world. If you are so scared of saying anything while you are in the West, in the free world, and because you are so scared from China, and what is the future is going to be hold for you? The Uyghur genocide is not China's internal affairs, as the Chinese authorities love to claim. It is very much our issue to address, as well as our corporations are complicit in it. Well, when you look at the Olympic Games, just they ended last few days because of pandemic. Few months before, if the international, when you are hurt athletes and what happened in Moscow and all that, well then move it. Move the games. First, postpone the games. If you can postpone the Olympic Games because of pandemic, which basically the Chinese covering ups, and they're not telling the international world about this virus. I'm not going to get into the details about where the virus originated, but what we can see clearly is the Chinese regime did not inform the international community, and they be responsible for spreading it to the world. When they closed down their own internal borders, they didn't close the international borders, allowed the people to leave and they travel all over the world. So if you can postpone the Olympic Games because of the pandemic, of course you can postpone the games because of genocide. Then postpone the games and then move to another city, so we don't have to have all these discussions. The Olympic Committee and the sponsors and athletes and all the responsible people from the world, they should not allow Beijing to host this Olympic Games, because the Olympic Games is a very distinguished games. The international community coming together from different race, from different religion, and speaking different languages, coming together in the names of this international games. A region targeting the Uyghurs because of their race, because of their religion and ethnicity, and the forbidding them to speak in their own language, practicing their religion, and conducting active genocide against their race, is the last country in the world to host such a distinguished, such a special games in the world.